Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money episode 60. I'm your host, Austin Black, joined by my good friend and co-host, Bob Wessler, and a special guest on today's episode, Miss Suzanne Scullion. Suzanne is a financial coach and the founder of Grace Financial Coaching. She embarked on her own debt-free journey in 2014, during which time she relocated from New York to San Diego and began helping others with their financial journey. After paying off 90,000 in less than 4 years, she started her own coaching practice in 2019, and she now resides in Virginia Beach, Virginia, with her husband Joe. Suzanne, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm really excited about this conversation because we've had a limited number of conversations between us, but they have all been so much fun, so fantastic. So I am excited to have you on the show today. Welcome to the Heart of Money.
Yes. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate you guys having me. I was saying behind the scenes that talking with other coaches is really inspiring. It's super inspiring to talk to our clients, right? Well, sometimes it's a little sad and depressing, but integrating with other coaches and having that interaction, like just today at I think it was like 2:00 my time, I had this amazing conversation with a coach on the West Coast and, just re-energized me to help people and go out there and help them with their money. Like my coach did when I paid off $90,000. So it's awesome to be with you guys.
Fantastic. Well, Suzanne, that is exactly, why we started this show, to have those meaningful conversations, because there's so much about money that no one talks about. And, our goal with this show is to have those open, honest, transparent conversations. We can learn from each other. We can inspire, we can motivate, we can encourage. So it's great. This is the first time I've had a fellow financial coach on the show. So I'm excited about that part. I know we're gonna have some fantastic conversation. Of course, I guess Bob is a financial coach too. So I kind of, we've been doing this together, but being a part of the active community is so much fun. So I'm really excited for this. Suzanne, for those who have not heard about Grace Financial Coaching, aren't familiar with who you are, what you do, give us just a real quick overview of where you are today and how you're serving your customers.
Awesome. So GRACE is actually an acronym, and it stands for Guidance, Resources, Accountability, Communication, and Evaluation. And the reason I took that, I actually took the word first. A lot of people think I created the word around those pieces. I actually had the word grace first. Mm-hmm. And then I decided, you know what, this actually means something. And those words fell into place super easily. So it's guidance, resources, accountability, communication, and evaluation. I think the hardest one is the communication part. And to me, once you get to a place where you can hire a coach, and this is like life coach, relationship coach, physical coach, personal trainer, any sort of coach, the accountability is there. If the coach is halfway decent, the accountability is there.
Right.
But the communication can mean a lot of different things. The communication can mean between you and your spouse who are working with the coach, or the communication can mean between you and the coach, or the communication can be between you and yourself.
Yes.
And I think what people underestimate is the psychology of money within our own lives and how our upbringing and what we have internalized affects how we spend our money. And that communication piece, whether you're talking with your spouse, talking with the coach, talking internally to yourself, that piece of grace, I think, is the most underestimated one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I know I found recently, especially, a lot of instances where you mentioned the communication between you and yourself. There's so much inner, not necessarily doubt, but just back and forth, conflict and, questioning and decision making. And I think we probably do it, we all do it to ourselves. We have those two voices on our shoulders, right? Saying, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, you can do this, you can't do this. And it's constantly a battle. I think that's one of the reasons why having a coach is so important, to help create that motivation, that encouragement, because those arguments you have in your head with yourself can sometimes be your biggest enemy and your biggest obstacle to get over, outside of what other people are telling you or what your spouse is talking about. So I love that you brought up that part. And yeah, I completely agree that communication is by far the biggest component of any type of success. What do you think, Bob?
I would agree with that. I was interested in finding out which way you were meaning with the communication, and putting so many different aspects to it. But yeah, speaking to yourself, and you don't have anybody else talking to you that much during the day, or there might be more than two voices, Austin. I don't know how many voices you have going on, but yeah,
it depends upon how many kids are screaming at the same time.
That's right. I don't know how many you heard in the background just a while ago, but they're here and they're leaving again. So, yeah, just the constant communication that we give to ourselves, and how much and Austin and I have talked about this before, our upbringings and how that has motivated and shaped how we spend money and how we think about money. And yeah, it's great to hear somebody else have that same thought process and have those same experiences with other clients.
Yeah, it's the number one question I ask in consultations. What was money like for you growing up? Mm-hmm. And if anybody's listened to my podcast or talked to me before, they've heard this, but the number of times that I have had a couple sitting in front of me, husband and a wife, and I look, hey, wife, what was money like for you growing up? And she either gives me a one sentence answer, or she goes on a diatribe for 20 minutes. How many times the husband has turned and looked at her and goes, I had no idea. We've been married for 10 years. I had no idea that your father used money as a threat. I had no idea that your mother withheld a new pair of jeans if you didn't get a certain grade and you had to go to middle school in the same dirty pair of jeans every day for 3 months. And by the way, it goes the other direction also. Probably more often than not. I'm just going to stereotype here. A lot of guys are not going to just openly, even with their spouses, say, hey, honey, this is what money was like growing up. I know we've been married for 15 years, but let me just let you in on a little secret. We had no money. We went to Disney World on credit, and my parents' credit card bounced, got closed at the entrance to the gate, and we never got to go. And that was a really traumatizing experience. So it goes both directions. But I have had consultations where that's the only question I got to ask. Huh. And what does that tell you?
I believe that.
No other questions. I've got 2 pages worth of questions, and not one other question was uttered by me, except we had to get through what was money like for you growing up on both sides of that coin. And it's really unbelievable how that affects people moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and, looking back at the conversations I've had with clients, and, I don't think we probably have talked about this enough on the show. We've talked about this element and this piece, just the fact that communication is important, that you got to be on the same page with your spouse. We've covered all of this, but we have not talked about is the fact that husbands and just, or I should say men and women, husbands and wives, or men and women, they have a hard time talking about money, period, because, there's such differing perspectives. And, to your point, guys don't just open up about that. That's, one of the pieces why in my program, developing effective communication is where everything starts. If we can't get that communication created, then nothing else I teach you is going to be of value. But what is really unique to me, and where I want to kind of dig into a little bit here, is how difficult it is for that conversation to take place. And I know you kind of mentioned in a joking way, 15, 20 years, and they haven't talked about it. Why is it so hard for us to talk about money with our spouse? They are our best friend, our closest confidant, someone that we should be able to entrust everything with. And yet so many couples have a hard time talking about money, talking about their past, sharing that. What's
Yeah.
been your experience around that, Suzanne?
Honestly, Austin, I think that's a very unfortunate American thing. And I'm going to go to another. I don't know how many kids are listening. So, parents, if you got some kids in the car, put some earmuffs on. This is going to be PG, but I'm going to use a couple words. In Europe, they are much more free when it comes to having conversations around sex, for example. There are more nude beaches in Europe than the entire continental United States. And the reason for that is there's less of a stigma around sex and nudity in Europe. There's also much less of a stigma around money. Europeans save something like 4 times the amount of Americans by the time they're 30 years old. I'm actually probably being cautious with that stat. It's something absolutely insane to the point where you would be sick to your stomach, where German citizens are saving 8 times the amount of American citizens. Swedish citizens are saving 3 times the amount, and it goes by country by country. I've looked it up before. I've used it in different talks, but we as Americans, for some reason, we can't talk about sex and we can't talk about money. I don't know why.
It's true.
But that is, and I have clients who are therapists, who are marriage and family counselors, and those are the biggest issues that show up in premarital counseling, post-marital counseling, and marital counseling that eventually turns into divorce. And that is, it all starts with having the capability to talk about what it was like before you were married, before you were in this relationship. And it's very difficult for us. I encourage my clients, my group coaching members to kind of go through a process of let's not just answer what was money like for you growing up. Let's get a little deeper in there and let's talk about, if you're going to give me a 1-word answer, oh, money was tight. Let's just say somebody gives me a 1-word answer and they say money was tight. Okay, money was tight. Did you were you able to earn money? Did you help out around the house? Did you have a chore list? Did you have a paper route back in the day when there was paper routes? Did you go out and, use dad's lawnmower and use dad's snow shovel and do the neighbor's driveway next door in the winter? I know you guys don't know much about snow where you are, but I grew up in New York. Did you get an allowance? Was there a time for you as a child when money ran out? This is a 2-part question. Was there a time as a child where money ran out? And did you know about it?
Mm-hmm.
Did you wake up one morning and mom said, school pictures are today, but we're not buying any school pictures? But all 5 years of school pictures before that, your parents spent $65, $75, $100 on a school picture package. Did you ever wake up and you knew as a kid money was gone? And how did that affect you? Because to be 7 years old and know that one of your parents has lost their income is a lot different than being 17 years old and knowing your parents have lost their income. It is traumatizing.
I'm thinking back to some of the memories I've had at that age, and they linger with you. They affect who you are. They affect how you think, what you do, how you respond. Bob, I talked about this in a recording here a few weeks ago, in that there was an age of children that are so easily impressioned, so easily ingrained in everything that happens around them. And that affects, we were talking about the money management tactics and habits that they employ based upon what they see when they're a kid. And I think, this kind of goes along with that, in that if you see or hear your parents do something that monumental, you're never going to forget about that. And it is going to impact your everything. Maybe not your everything, but it's going to continuously impact your life and your mental and your emotional and your spiritual and everything. Relational, everything. So I'm having a few flashbacks of things that I experienced at that time, and just how that has transpired. Bob, is there anything that jumped out there at you? I got something back in my mind I want to ask everyone. Give you a chance to pop in here with a question.
I have things that, as Suzanne was going through that, thoughts that came to mind. They weren't specifically about money related, but different instances and moving or this or that as a kid that really affected me. Seeing now as having a stepdaughter and how that affects her between two different households. And she's now in her teenage years, so it's not as much of a as what it was probably 10 years ago for her. And just thinking to myself, yeah, I could see where the differences with both of her parents um, changes for her. So not specifically around money, but just in growing up and now not having something specifically affect me, but having um, family members or kids that I know. So Austin, go ahead with your question.
So the thought that's been in the back of my mind, you mentioned earlier a little bit, the differences between Europeans and Americans and just the willingness to talk about things. And I've even noticed in my own conversations with people, as a financial coach, I love talking about money. I'm open about it. I'm honest about it. I'll tell you things that you'd probably be surprised to know. I'm very comfortable. I think it's a healthy conversation. I think we can learn a lot. But I've been around people who they're not about to say anything financially related. That is off the table, hushed mouth. We are not talking about it. Maybe not even with our spouse to that full extent. I mean, it is a very, 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 very private, personal matter, which to me, I see the necessity of private and personal matters, and not everything is public discussion. I get all that. But I honestly feel like too many people are too hushed mouth about what's going on, whether it's with their spouse, with their partner, with even just their friends and family, their acquaintances. I mean, there's things that we can learn from each other, that we can build each other up. That's one of the reasons why we had these conversations on here, is to have that open have that transparency around that. So all of that to say, do you think that there is a healthy level of confidence or confidentiality that a couple should maintain? And how do they find that without sharing too much and without not sharing enough?
Yes, definitely. The there is a I'm gonna screw it up now, but there's like an old adage, old wives' tale, whatever you want to call it, that like you should share these things with your husband, but you should never leave the bathroom door open. So everyone has those very deep, dark, personal things that they're not going to share even with their spouse of 20, 30, 40 years, right? But one of the things, to your point, Austin, that you brought up that I wasn't even going to get into this area, but I think you really hit on it. We live in a time of, we're recording this in 2022. For all of you people who are watching it in 2042, we're recording this in 2022. And social media is so influential. And I'm not just talking about following Kim Kardashian on Instagram. I'm talking about following your next door neighbors when they go to Disney World and seeing their pictures, and they got their Christmas photos out before you did, and all of their kids look perfect. And, this photo shoot must have cost $500. And that keeping up with the Joneses cliche that still rings true, but has now turned into, I'm not keeping up with the Joneses next door who have the 1950 something Cadillac. I'm now keeping up with the Joneses next door who spent $7,000 on a family cruise. And the lack of communication between us, our friends, our neighbors, our spouses mutates. It turns into this horrific thing of they have more money than we do. Their life is better than ours. They're having more fun than us. My life sucks. My spouse isn't as good as their spouse. And now we're getting into a whole area of like, cheating and coveting and things like that can get really, really, really deep and dark. But just keeping it on the money level of, wow, that family is better off than ours. What would it look like if I was married to someone different? What would it look like if I got more money in my job like my next door neighbor did? And we go into this really deep, dark place, and it's really scary. That is the consequence of not communicating with your spouse or communicating with your coach or communicating with yourself. those are the consequences. And they can be really, really scary and really upsetting and really deep and really dark.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And gosh, Bob, I can think of so many ways that it would be easy for us, any of us, to go down that road. I think back to, people even in my church that probably have a nicer vehicle than I do, that have a better job than I do, that, just seem to have it all together. I'm like, man, why can't I have that? And we
Yes.
automatically go into this comparison cycle. And I'm glad that you brought forth just the depth that can go down, because we got to put guards up, we got to put boundaries up and say, we're not going there. Being open and honest, having that outside conversation. Um, the thing that I'm kind of wondering about is, okay, to what level should we share our financial concerns, our achievements, our goals? Is that something that we tell our wife and not anyone else, or husband or not anyone else? Is that something that we share with some close friends? Because I think, and I've even been guilty of, you see someone do something and you automatically assume what it was, and you find out after the fact that it wasn't that way. They actually did it the right way, and you were over here judging them for what you thought, but you never talked to them about it. So you never
Right.
knew anything different. So there's got to be a happy medium there in having the personal and private areas of our life, but still being able to talk about it and learn from it, and um, be open to how other people are doing things that look really cool.
So one of the number one things I tell my clients is, and this may sound self-serving, right? So I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to give you a little caveat. Hey, tell your friends that you're working with a financial coach. Here's what that does. One, sure, it brings in referrals for me. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's not the point. By having them tell their friends they're working with financial coach, and sometimes they're using me as the bad cop, sometimes they're using me as the good cop. It gives them the leverage to say to their friends, and this goes for married people and single people as well. It gives them the leverage to say, we can't do that normal monthly dinner that we do at that restaurant where it's 10 courses because our financial coach told us we can't. If you want to use me as the bad guy, you can do it for the entire year that we're working together. I don't care if you got to tell your mother-in-law you're not buying her Christmas presents this year. That might be the most freeing thing that ever happens to you. But my point is sharing the fact that you're working with someone on your finances, friend, family member. I've had a couple people who have come to me without their spouse and said, I want to work with you. I talked to my spouse. That person will not, that other spouse, that husband or wife will not come to this meeting. Mm-hmm. And I have had to make the decision as a financial coach to say, listen, from a philosophical standpoint, I don't want you here without your spouse because it's a household budget, it's household income, blah, 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 blah. But there have been some times where the Spirit has led me and said, hey, do you know what? Just have this conversation. Do this consultation. Mm-hmm. They filled out the snapshot. They made it abundantly, the financial snapshot that I have people fill out, they made it abundantly clear their spouse won't be there. They were honest with you. Do the consultation and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And some of those consultations have turned into working with one of the spouses for 3 months. And then the other spouse shows up for the next 6 or the next 9 or the next 12. And it has turned into something really amazing. Have I had those consultations where I've had both spouses there and I was like, well, I'll work with you, but I'm not working with you. Full disclosure, folks, if you're looking to hire any of us as a financial coach, we are, I don't like to use the word judging you, but we as coaches, we want to work with people who are motivated. And that's the number one thing I tell people now is that if you're motivated, I don't care how upside down your budget is. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I am working with a gentleman. I'm from New York City. I'm working with a gentleman who works for the Transportation Authority in New York City right now. He's $1,500 over budget every month. And he is not the worst case I've ever worked with.
Mm-hmm. Oh my.
And he shows up to these meetings. I did 95% of the homework. He's probably one of my most well-performing clients, and he's still $1,500 over budget. But what does that tell you? He was $3,500 over budget when he called me. Right?
Wow.
He was $2,500, whatever it was. I don't even remember at this point. But as of 2 days ago, he was $1,500 over budget, and we've already been working together for a couple months.
Yeah.
And he shows up and he does the homework and he's motivated and he wants to move forward. And that is really what, as behind the scenes guys, as coaches, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those clients who are ready to move forward. I don't care if you're $6,000 over budget. We'll get you down to $3,000. But you need to be doing the work, right? As coaches, we provide the guidance, we provide the accountability, we provide the resources, just like is in the name of my company, but we can't provide the motivation. There's no M in grace. You have to provide the motivation. You have to be ready to change. And if you're ready to change without your spouse, in some situations, I will work with a single spouse. As a military spouse, one of those specific situations is when one spouse is deployed. But if the other spouse is sitting in the living room watching TV and you're ready to go, I may very well work with you on a one-to-one basis. It really just depends on the situation. And I would be curious to hear your guys' feedback on that.
Well, I was going to ask if you had, who was it that you usually worked with in those situations? Was it the husband or the wife?
It's probably 50-50.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the beginning, it was probably more women. But I would say over the last year or so, it's about 50-50.
Okay.
It's evened itself out.
Well, and Austin and I have had conversations where it's typically the wife that comes in first that is motivated, that wants to get things done, and the husband's dragging his feet and sometimes does, sometimes doesn't get motivated. It usually takes an act of God in some cases to get the husband to be motivated.
That happens sometimes, guys.
Yeah. Right. So I was just curious if you were seeing the same thing as far as majority of women being the first to the table in essence. And
I think with the female perspective, and I'm going to give you the female perspective, obviously, but with the female perspective, sometimes the husbands who reach out first, and again, I don't want to make this sound like they're looking for a female financial coach, right? They just Googled financial coach and I showed up in their area, right? Or they heard about me from another friend or whatever it is. They may have wanted a male financial coach and they couldn't find one just based on Google algorithms, and which we'll never be able to figure out. But I will say with something consistent with those conversations when I just end up speaking with the husband, with the male, is that there is a sense, I hate to say this, but I am the female, so I'm going to say it anyway. There is a sense of entitlement on the wife's side. And having grown up in New York, you get two different types of people there. Both spouses have to be working. You can't live in New York without both spouses working. It's an impossibility. We're paying for daycare where kids are in public school. You cannot physically live there without both spouses working. Or growing up in New York, only the husband works. And they're making $1 million a year, $2 million a year, whatever it is. And there is a sense of entitlement on the wife's side of, I deserve this and I deserve that. And I raised the kids and I'm the one driving to gymnastics and to dance and to soccer and to football and all that stuff while the husband's going into Manhattan every day. I don't think that this is a New York centric problem. I don't. I'm a New Yorker. I am geocentric by nature, but I don't believe that this problem only exists in New York City. I believe it exists everywhere where there is one partner working and the other partner is not. Yeah. And what I think happens is the psychology of what is mine, what is yours. It almost, I hate to say this, but like we go backwards, right? So like when we were married, everything came together and now we all have the same finances and we live in the same house and all the furniture is ours, blah, blah. And then at some point it starts to divulge again. And I would love to have some sort of, psychologist do a study on at what point in our marriage do we start to get that entitlement where we say, hey, whoa, I've been home with the kids for all this time. What you've been making is 50% mine, 75% mine, whatever it is. And we go from a place of we're single, we're married, we're back together, and now we've separated again. Great example. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen are getting divorced or are divorced as we speak. And I can't imagine what that prenup looked like because she makes a lot more money than he does as an international supermodel. But that doesn't mean that they don't face the exact same problems as the couple that I'm working with who lives in New York City that makes less than $100,000 and their rent is $4,000 a month. It's the same thing.
Golly. It's almost a different world whenever you think about it sometimes, because it's the exact same concepts, totally different universes of that concept. I know
the
I've
math
heard
is totally different, right? The decimal point is a couple of spaces over.
Right. There was it's interesting, and I'm gonna go off topic of what we just talked about there, but something that you mentioned a little bit ago that caught my attention. You say that we don't judge our clients when they come work with us. But the interesting thing is, and I think that people don't realize this about a coach, and maybe I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on this. As a coach, we don't judge you, but we can tell really quickly where your holes are, where your weaknesses are, if you can even do this or not, before you even know what's wrong with your own problem. We can already tell what is the opportunity here for you, and do you have what it takes to make it? Are you cut out for this or not?
Yeah. I would, Bob, what's your experience with that? Because I would say if I do a 40-minute consultation, within 20 minutes, I can give you an answer of whether or not they're going to be a client.
Right. I would say it probably doesn't even take that long. You look at a couple and you can tell who the motivated one is, or if they're both motivated, or who the one is that's pushing to move forward. And then you look at the one that's not motivated, and can they be, or are they being pushed too much to where they're just going to resent it and say, I'm not playing. I think the initial response you can find out pretty quickly just by the interaction without even knowing anything financially.
What do you think about single people, though? What happens like when you have a consultation with somebody who's single, male or female, and you're just like, oh, this is going to be a waste of my 40 minutes?
I have not done any single consultations.
Okay.
I couldn't say on that one.
I've kind of shifted to where I only work with couples because that's just how my framework and how my program is lined up. But I remember early on when I very first became a financial coach, I had consultation probably with two or three different ones with young single people. And I could tell within about 10 minutes if they were actually going to commit to anything or not, just because of their understanding of what they were dealing with, what they wanted to accomplish, and what it was going to take to get there. And it was like, either you're in or you're not. There's really no in between there.
Yeah.
But it did not take very long. And, with the couples, like Bob was saying, you can usually tell really quickly, okay, this person is interested. This person knows what's going on. This person is just here because their spouse asked them to come sit on the meeting with them. What is going to happen here? And it's interesting because you either have this point of, okay, my spouse wants to do this and I want to support them, so I'm in, or we don't need this. Why are we even doing this? And again, there's not much in between there.
Yeah.
But if you can get to that first point, you have a lot better success.
Yeah. And I feel like this is like a total behind the scenes. Like, you guys should rename this episode. Like, if you don't watch this, if you want to work with a financial coach. But it's so true because like we can tell the people who are going to be the ones who are motivated, right? Like we can tell one of the biggest things, and again, sometimes I don't get to this part of the consultation, but what is your why? Why are we here? Why are you sitting here talking to me on a computer screen? We've been talking to each other on computer screens for 2.5 years now at this point. I don't want to be doing it. You don't want to be doing it, but we're here for some reason. So why are we here? And if we don't have a good why answer, if there's not a good answer to that why, I mean, like you guys said, within the first 5 minutes, probably, if there's no good answer to that question, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, we're not revealing all of our trade secrets, but if anyone's listening, this is how we're judging you when we're on that consultation.
We are judging you.
but if you know what you're thinking
before you say it.
Yeah, but if you've listened to us for any amount of time, you know that Austin doesn't judge anybody, even though it pretty much comes up in just about every conversation on how he's judging someone somehow, somewhere.
Right.
So
we'll just rename it to make Austin feel better, but the rest of us are judging you. Don't worry about it.
We'll just rename it. He's not judging you.
He's not judging you, but. And actually, it's really funny that that came up because one of the things I ask people is if you have a why, if we know what that why is, what's preventing you from attaining that why? Again, why are we sitting here? What have you tried that has failed?
Yeah.
And God, like these questions, they just don't come up in your normal daily married life, do they?
Yep.
It's who's bringing so-and-so to soccer practice? Who's making dinner tonight? I ordered pizza. Why did you order pizza? We don't have any money left this month. And then it devolves into the financial. And like, guys, we've all been through this, right? So it really that why and that communication. I think if I could just beat anybody over the head with anything in the last 35 minutes, it would be
because
to have
those
that
questions
why
don't
and to
come
have
up.
that communication.
Because those questions don't come up in everyday life, that's why you end up having to work with a coach. Because you don't talk about it, you don't understand how it works, you don't have that communication lineup, and so you have to go find someone who can open those doors and have that conversation. And it's not natural for that to be an everyday mention of, hey, honey, how you feeling about our future and finances? We don't think about talking about that. But if you don't, at some point, then you end up working for Bob, Suzanne, or myself, and we all benefit from that. So I guess if that's where we want to go, then, I encourage everyone to take that step. But to your point, that's where it all starts.
Yeah, definitely. What I would also encourage people to do, though, is get to a place where you don't need to call the three of us. Call us when you're engaged, right? I don't know if you guys have ever worked doing like premarital counseling type stuff or very early on in the marriage. I have a couple right now who, God, if they've been married 2 years, I think it's a little bit long. But they are one of my best clients because they're like, we got married and realized we don't want to end up like XYZ parents, like XYZ friends. We want to figure this out early. And that's honestly the best way to do it. But we'll have to save that for like episode 2 of this conversation. We'll talk about premarital counseling.
There you go. There you go. Well, Suzanne, I definitely want to have you back on because, as I said at the beginning, and it did prove true, we have fantastic conversations. Love your insight, love your passion, your enthusiasm, your stories. Very much enjoyed this conversation with you. Where can folks learn more about you, connect with you, sign up for your coaching programs, and stay a part of Suzanne Scullion's everyday life?
Yeah, Grace Financial Coaching, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. Same across all platforms, GRACE Financial Coaching. And Suzanne at gracefinancialcoaching.com. Shoot me an email and we'll get you on the calendar. And we'll have those nice, awkward conversations.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time, your insight, and just your exuberance that you share. So thank you so much for being on the show today, and I look forward to having you again.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Austin. We'll talk to you soon.